Hello, it's Adewale from StressTherapist.net. I've got a question for you today. Can thinking be used as a cure for depression? Shouldn't we be able to answer this question now with all the knowledge we've been able to gain through modern science? Well, in this tutorial, I will be sharing some new scientific information that sheds light on how you can apply practical thinking-based strategies in your struggle with depression. So please stay tuned. The thoughts we have cause more of a reaction within our bodies than we often realize. For example, if you are hungry and you remembered your favorite dish, suddenly you might notice your tummy begins to rumble. That's a simple example of how thinking can create a reaction within the body. In the same way, depressive thinking has its own series of reactions within our bodies. What kinds of thoughts can contribute to depressive thinking? Examples are bitter memories, memories where you remember people hurting you, negative thoughts about depression itself, and self-critical thoughts. Now, it has been found that these kind of thoughts generate an internal battle, an internal feeling of pressure and stress. And this internal battle, if prolonged, can have the effect of increasing certain hormones in our system. Sadly, too much of one particular hormone has the effect of pushing us down the depressive downward spiral. But why does this downward spiral occur? You see, the more we have an increase in this particular hormone, the more we find ourselves developing what I refer to as the blinkered specs. This is some kind of tunnel vision that causes us to focus more and more on the negative aspects of the situations around us. With our blinkered specs on, we seem to project hurtful events into our current situation, and this makes us see everything in a dark and gloomy way. Now, as the blinkered specs intensifies, our depressive thinking worsens, which goes on to produce more of this depressive hormone. Hence, the cycle is locked in. Depressive thinking creating depressive hormones, which makes us think more depressive thoughts. And cycle goes on, whilst we gradually find our mood going down and down. But I'm glad to say it's not all bad news. Because within the last few years, scientists have been able to study the effect of this hormone to understand how it goes about causing depression. And this brings the good news of the possibility to do something practical for resolving depression. So what is this hormone? If you have been following many of my articles, you would have noticed that I keep talking about a hormone called cortisol. Now, cortisol is a very important hormone. And in fact, if we have no cortisol, we'll die. But what scientists have now found out is that if you have way too much cortisol in your system over a long period of time, it begins to cause a reduction in the availability of some other hormones that are crucial for recovery from depression. Cortisol is a stress hormone that increases in our system over a period of time when we are subjected to pressure or stressful situations. Normally, cortisol helps us fight back and cope with pressure. However, if you were to engage in intense depressive thinking for a period of 3 to 4 weeks, there is a likelihood that the level of cortisol within your bloodstream will become way too much. As I said earlier, Staying with too much cortisol in the system for a long period of time causes a reduction of certain hormones that are crucial to recovery in depression. You may have heard about these three hormones: norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin. Interestingly, many antidepressants work to increase the availability of these hormones in our systems. Now, what kind of impact can the reduction of these three hormones have on us? Too little norepinephrine causes an impairment in our ability to make decisions. It reduces motivation and makes it difficult to perform tasks properly. Too little dopamine causes an inability to feel pleasure. And then too little serotonin causes an increase in the feelings of grief. In addition, a reduction in serotonin will cause a tendency to be obsessive in nature. So if you look closely at these effects, increased sense of grief, inability to feel pleasure, difficulty to perform tasks properly, and difficulty to motivate the self, or impaired decision making, and compare it with your experience of depression, you see a direct match. It is not surprising then that people find it so difficult to experience pleasure or motivate themselves into action when they feel so low. But as I said earlier, it's not all bad news. Because if you cue into what is happening here, you start to notice that you can do something practical to turn the wheel about. So how can we go about turning things around? First, if we engage in practical strategies that help to reduce cortisol in our system, this will help to increase the necessary hormones in your system that will help to drive down depression. Hence, you will experience an improvement in your mood. Then, any attempts to think positively will be more effective because now you can feel the pleasure. Hormones are supporting your attempts to motivate, and it stops feeling like an uphill struggle. Finally, you can make your recovery more permanent by learning strategies that can help to change your negative thinking habits so that you don't keep driving your cortisol levels up. Hopefully, you can see now that practical thinking based strategies can indeed be used for breaking free from depression. But the proof is in the pudding. I don't just expect you to sit down there and just accept everything I'm saying. And in fact, we can sit down here and argue for the next 5 years about the validity of the points I'm making. The only true way you can know if these ideas or suggestions really work is if you take the time out and practice the strategies and see for yourself. And remember, if you have found this tutorial useful, please share it with someone you know, a friend or a family member who may be struggling with depression. Let's work together to break down the chains of depression in our society.